This lesson I'm going to show you how easy it is to work with Ajax and jQuery. And this is truly why web developers love jQuery, because it makes it really easy. So let's set up our first element, and we're going to create a button here and just give it an ID. So this button can have an ID for click me. So when we want to trigger our Ajax call, we're going to just click the button and then we're going to have something happen. So click here. So I have a silly message in there just to click. Let's also create a div. So create a div above that button, and this is where our output content will go. So there we go. So that's all we really need within the HTML, and now we're ready to use jQuery to create that functionality. And with jQuery, it's so super easy to grab elements. It's done the same way as we would with CSS. So for instance, if I wanted to grab that brand new click me button that I've just created, I can simply grab it within this way. And as mentioned, we make the selection accordingly the same way that we do with CSS. So a hash is for IDs, a dot is for classes, and then this is just for the tag name. But because this one's an ID, so we'll grab that element. And you can see that it automatically makes that selection, it returns it, and it returns it within an array. So it returns that first value, because this is going to be across all these different types of elements. So it could be classes, and we could return a number of them, and that's why it's returned within this type of function. And we've got also jQuery functionality. So if we wanted to update the text and all of a sudden we didn't like click here, we could say wow or something like that, and go ahead and we can change that, and right away it changes it and it connects to that element. So we've got a really good fast connection to the DOM, and we can do our updates to the DOM all using jQuery, as well as do our event listeners using jQuery. So that's really the beauty of jQuery, because it makes it just really easy to make these selections. So if we want to make this button clickable, let's go over to our script and let's do that now. So we know that our jQuery is up and running. So there's the API documentation. So this will walk you through everything that you need to know, all the different functions that are available. So if you are curious about finding more about jQuery, there are a lot of really cool methods here. And the one that we're going to be looking at in detail is going to be the jQuery Ajax one. So that's this one over here, which is going to allow us to perform asynchronous Ajax requests. And if you're wondering, some of them have $.ajax, some of them have jQuery.ajax. Same thing. It's actually the same thing that you write out. So we've got the $sign here, but we could just as easily do jQuery and then make our selection and select the element. So let me select that output. And let's update the HTML to say hello. And we see, there we go. So we've made our change, and it's as easy as that. If you want to practice jQuery, take a second now, pause the video, and make a selection. So bring your library in, make sure jQuery is hooked up and ready to go, running. You could also do the $sign, and you can see that once you type that $sign in the console, then you should see some type of return there. And that means that jQuery is ready to go. So this is the same thing as writing jQuery. They're interchangeable, but of course the $sign is way easier to write. So do try it out for yourself, and now let's hook up our jQuery. So we saw how easy it is to make our selection of our elements. So let's go ahead and do that, and we're going to select that click me button. So we had given it an ID, so we're just grabbing it by the ID, and the method that we're using to bind the event handler is click. So this is going to be binding the JavaScript add event listener, essentially allowing us to trigger off and run a function whenever the button gets clicked here. So we'll just say hello. It's always good to kind of double check and make sure that everything is clicked. And also, I'm writing things here in the console, so this gives me the ability to run JavaScript, and we know that it only is updating this current instance of JavaScript. So when I do refresh it, it reverts back to the original source code as it renders out the new refreshed page. So here we go. We've got our click me button hooked up. And now whenever we click it, we see hello. So we're all ready to go to initiate our jQuery and make our API call. So you could do it in a number of different ways. You can create a function in order to do that. We'll call it web data. So we'll call over to the function, and then down here we'll just we'll hook up and we'll grab our function here, and function, and this time let's just give it its name, so web data, and then here we'll console log out hello again. So now when we refresh, we see hello is there. And you can even shorten this even further because we know that it's simply running a function. So now that if we only want to run the one function, then we can get rid of the function because we already have a function here, and we can simplify it even more. Change this click to that one statement so that now when we refresh and we click it, we're just firing off this function. So that's all we're doing, and it just shortened the code a little bit more and made it more readable. So the next thing that we want to do is we actually want to hook up our AJAX call. So we're going to do our AJAX within the web data function. So now we can get rid of this console, and let's just add in our AJAX there. So we call jQuery methods by doing the $sign. So that indicates that this is a jQuery method dot, and then after the dot, that's where we place the method. So this one does require a few parameters. As we saw, parameters are within an object format, so we need to pass in a URL. And there's a number of different APIs I've got here. So we'll just try this one here just to see if this one is working. And you can also specify the method. So it could be get, but by default, it's already going to be get. You could also do data type. So I'll show you those afterwards. So this is just the bare minimum. We need to pass in a URL. And then after we pass in that URL, we can do something with done. So done allows us to essentially chain a callback method. So basically our function there, and then our callback method is there. So we're able to do something when it gets returned. And this one can be another function as well. So maybe we can just do, or we'll just call it output. We'll call the function output, and then we'll build out a brand new function. So there we go. So that's all we really need. And then over here, let's do our function, and we'll call it output. And then within here, and we also need to pass over some data, and let's console log out that data. So we'll take a closer look and we'll see what's actually showing up when we're done. So let's refresh, click, and we see, there we go. So we've got all of that information just got returned through the AJAX call. So now it's up to you. Try this out for yourself. In the next lesson, I'll show you even more that you can do with this data, where we can parse through it and we can actually make use of it and complete the AJAX stuff by placing some content onto our web page. So that's all coming up in the next lesson.